Chapter 40. He ran far that day, away from the town, letting the wind wash him. When he returned to the West End, he heard in the distance Mrs. Pickwell whistling her children to dinner. Though he had heard the whistle many times, he had not answered it since his first day in town. Now he felt, as he had that day, that it was meant for him. This time, of course, there was a difference. He was no stranger. He was Maniac Magee, the kid who had walked barefoot through the dump near their house. The Pickwell kids cheered when he showed up, and treated him like a legend in the flesh. Mrs. Pickwell did better. She treated him like a member of the family, as if she would have been surprised if he hadn't come on the whistle. Nor was Maniac the only visitor for dinner. Mr. Pickwell had brought home a down-and-out shoe salesman in sore need of sympathy and a good meal. As Maniac ate and talked and laughed his way through dinner, he couldn't help thinking of the Beals. How alike the two families were. Friendly, giving, accepting. So easily he could picture the Beals' brown faces around this dinner table, and the little Pickwell kids' white bodies in the bathtub at 728 Sycamore. Whoever had made of Hector Street a barrier, it was surely not these people. Fortified by his good time at the Pickwells, Maniac returned to the Mcnabbs. After the East End scare, Russell and Piper no longer demanded stunts of him in return for attending school. On the one hand, this was a relief to Maniac. On the other, it had left him with less influence over them. He could always extort a day or two in class from them with the free weekly pizza. Beyond that, he goaded them toward school any way he could. He organized a marbles tournament that could take place only in the schoolyard during recess. He tried reading to them as he had to Hester and Lester and to Grayson, but they paid as much attention as the Roaches. He took them to the library, then scrapped that idea after their shenanigans left the librarian blubbering and blue-faced. Then May arrived with its warm weather and blew away what little power he had left. The boys began again to dream of travel. Wood appeared in the backyard. They were building a raft. "Gonna sail down the river to the ocean," they said. One day he heard frenzied horn honking and screaming. He turned to see an ancient rusty gas hog convertible rolling by, with Russell behind the wheel and Piper jumping up and down and shrieking in the back seat. By the time Maniac caught up, they were gone and the car was shuddering against a telephone pole. Another time he had to run them down and haul them back to Dorsey's grocery, where he made them empty their bulging pockets of the 50 bubble gums they had stolen. It was a maddening, chaotic time for Maniac. Running in the mornings and reading in the afternoons gave him just enough stability to endure the zany nights at the Mcnabbs. When he asked himself why he didn't just drop them, the answer was never clear. It wasn't so much that he wanted to stay as that he couldn't go. In some vague way, to abandon the Mcnabb boys would be to abandon something in himself. He couldn't shake the suspicion that deep inside Russell and Piper Mcnabb, in the prayer-dark seat of their kidhoods, they were identical to Hester and Lester Beale. But they were spoiling, rotting from the outside in like a pair of peaches in the sun. Soon, unless somebody did something, the rot would reach the pit. And yet he held back. Oh, he prodded and persuaded and inspired and bribed the boys to do right, but he never forced them. Never commanded, never shouted, because to do so would be parental, and he was not yet ready for that. How could he act as a father to these boys, when he himself ached to be somebody's son? But then one day, the boys went too far. He found them playing with the old glove Grayson had given him for Christmas. As if they weren't bad enough, they were using it as a football, punting it back and forth. Maniac exploded. He popped off for a good 10 minutes, got it all out. This was the last straw, he told them. From now on, it was going to be different. No more Mr. Nice Guy. When I say jump, you say how high. Got it? They got it. For the first time in their lives, the boys were speechless. Speechless as they did their homework that night. Speechless as they went to bed at 9 o'clock. Speechless as they went off to school the next morning. The peace lasted 3 days. Shock accounted for the first day. The second and third days were a new game called obedience, or being good. When the game lost its appeal, Maniac lost his power. He told them to sit, they stood. He told them to stand, they sat. Instead of going to school, they worked on their raft. Instead of doing homework, they played war in the pillbox. They brought their plastic weapons down from the hole and stationed themselves at the 2 small gunnery slots in the cinder block wall and blasted away anyone moving through the house, not to mention imaginary rebels streaming through the door and over the windowsills. "Stop!" Maniac finally yelled and snatched the 2 red gun barrels protruding from the slots. In a moment, 2 more barrels appeared. "Stop!" he commanded. "Ain't shooting you," Russell whined. "We're shooting them rebels. Bam, 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 bam. Pow! Got one. Pow! Bam! Got another. Bam, bam! I said stop! Maniac grabbed the guns, threw them on the floor, and stomped them. He didn't stop till they were plastic splinters. The only sound was that of the turtle scratching somewhere in the room. The gunnery slots framed the boys' dumbstruck faces. Russell was the first to speak. "Get out of my house." "Yeah," sneered Piper. "Out of here." Maniac went upstairs, got his satchel, and was gone. That night and the next night he slept at the park. The following day, as he sat reading in the library, in came the Mcnabb boys. They rushed to him. "Hey, Maniac," blurted Piper, "we've been looking all over for you. You gotta come to my birthday party. I'm having a party tomorrow. What do you say, huh? You coming, huh?" Maniac couldn't believe it. The ugly feelings of the other day showed nowhere on their excited faces. "Come on, Maniac, you gotta!" And just like that, as he stared at them, the idea came. An idea as zany as they were. The words seemed to lift right off their faces, like sunburnt skin peeling. "Well, okay," he said, "on one condition." "What's that?" "If I can bring somebody with me." "Sure, bring everybody. We're gonna party." The librarian edged closer to the phone. Chapter 41. The Mcnabb boys didn't know whom they did expect Maniac to bring to the party, but one thing for sure, they did not expect him to come walking through the front door with a black kid. And that was only half of it. From the way the kid swaggered in, from the candy bar that jutted like a chocolate stogie from the corner of his mouth, from the ripstone evil scowl on his face, the kid had to be none other than Marsbar Thompson himself. If black meant bad, if black meant in-your-face nastiness, if black meant as far from white as you could get, then Marsbar Thompson was the blackest of the black. Here, in the middle of their living room, stopping the party, the neighborhood kids, the Cobras, even George Mcnabb, stopping them dead as traffic, just walked in through the front door, the steel door, breezed right on in, past the bars, standing there, I own this joining here, there, before they knew what was happening, before anyone could reach for anything, which of course is just what Maniac had in mind. Remembering how little Grayson had known about black people and black homes, thinking of the Mcnabbs' wrong-headed notions, thinking of Marsbar's knee-jerk reaction to anyone wearing a white skin, and thinking, naturally, what else would you expect? Whites never go inside blacks' homes, much less inside their thoughts and feelings, and blacks are just as ignorant of whites. What white kid could hate blacks after spending 5 minutes in the Beals house? And what black kid could hate whites after answering Mrs. Pickwell's dinner whistle? But the East Enders stayed in the East, and the West Enders stayed in the West, and the less they knew about each other, the more they could invent. It hadn't been easy. Finding Marsbars, taking all his lip about cheating on the race, taking some bumps, some shoves, Mars goading him to fight, but keeping his own cool, matching Marsbar's glare for glare, telling him he wasn't as bad as he thought he was, really stoking him now, making him slam his candy bar to the ground. "No? You want to tell me why I ain't so bad, fish? Go ahead, 'fore I waste ya." Chest to chest. Keeping cool, letting Mars do all the huffing. Simple. You don't cross Hector. You stay over here where it's safe. How bad would you be over there? Stepping back then, folding his arms, smugging it up just enough, standing there in his white skin, gazing nonchalantly about, 6 blocks deep in the heart of the black side. Guess that makes me badder than you. They did not go straight to the Mcnabbs. First, they went to the Pickwells. Maniac wanted Marsbar to see the best the West End had to offer. The little Pickwells made as much fuss over Marsbars as over Maniac. They believed, as all little kids in the West End, that he carried 100 Marsbars with him at all times. Not surprisingly, Mrs. Pickwell never batted an eye when she saw who was coming to dinner. It was quite a sight, all right, 16 Pickwells plus Maniac, plus a down-and-out golf caddy, 18 so-called white faces, and Marsbars Thompson. To his credit, Marsbars didn't use the words fish belly or honky once, though on one occasion he did bend the truth a mite. When a Pickwell kid asked him if it was true about the famous race in April, did Maniac really beat him going backward? Marsbar studied his fork for a minute and said, "Yeah, he went backward, but you got the whole story wrong. Wasn't me he beat, was my brother, Milky Way." The little kids couldn't understand why the grown-ups laughed for 5 minutes after that. As for Marsbars himself, his expression never changed until the dinner was almost over, when the littlest non-baby Pickwell dolly called him Mr. Barr. And even then it wasn't so much a smile as a crack in the glare. Even if Mars wasn't letting on, Maniac could tell he was pleased to learn his fame had spread to the West. When they left, half the Pickwell kids followed them, begging Mars to perform his legendary feat of stopping traffic. "Don't," Maniac warned. warned, "it might not work over here." But the Pickwells persisted, and when they reached Marshall Street, Mars Bars commanded, "Stay here," and stepped into the traffic. Not only did he shamble, jive, shuck, and hip-doodle at his own sweet pace, he did something he had never even done in the East End. He came to a complete and utter halt halfway across and let nothing but the evil in his eyes take care of the rest. He stood like that for 1 full minute. By the time he finally moved on to the far side, so the legend goes, 23 cars, several bicycles, and a bus were stacked to a dead stop in both directions. Maniac hurried across while the Pickwells stood at the curb, cheering and waving goodbye. But no one was cheering now in Fort Mcnabb, and Maniac knew that despite the swagger and the scowl and the chocolate stogie, Mars Bars Thompson was one uneasy dude. Chapter 42. George Mcnabb was the first to speak up. He was stretched out on the only new piece of furniture in the house, a tilt-back lounge chair. Said Mcnabb, "What's he doing here?" The awkward silence that followed was mercifully broken by Piper tugging on Maniac's arm. "Where's my birthday present? What'd you get me?" Maniac pulled the present from his pocket. Piper exclaimed, "A watch!" "No," said Maniac, "a compass. It tells you which direction you're going." "Like to the ocean?" asked Russell. "The ocean, Mexico, anywhere in the world. Only one thing." "What's that?" Maniac took the compass from Piper's hand. "I'm keeping it till school's over. If you go every day, both of you, then you can have it back and sail around the world." "On our raft?" Piper cheered. "Is it a deal?" Piper and Russell and Maniac did a 3-way high five. "It's a deal." George Mcnabb pulled himself up from the easy chair and shuffled into the kitchen. He wore bareback slippers over bare feet. His white ankles were dirty. He took a beer can from the fridge and headed for the steps. "Let me know when it leaves," he said, and went upstairs. Maniac could feel the voltage that surged through Mars Bars and crackled black lightning from his eyes. Quickly he clapped his hands. "Hey, isn't this a party? Where are the games?" So they played games, silly games whose main objective seemed to be shrieking and screaming. Mars Bar allowed himself to be dragged into them, but his jaw was clenched and his eyes kept straying to the gaping hole in the ceiling and to the cobras, who were slouching against the walls and baseboards, sipping beers and watching his every move. None of them had spoken since Mars and Maniac walked in. Of course, as far as the little kids were concerned, the highlight of the whole party was not the birthday boy, Piper Mcnabb, but the Mcnabb's new pillbox. They found every excuse to stay inside it. They fought over space at the narrow gunnery slots. When Mars Bar whispered to Maniac, "What is that?" Maniac said it was a bomb shelter. Then Russell called, "Let's play Rebels! White's in the pillbox, black's outside." A cheer went up, and a dozen kids stampeded into the pillbox. Their gabble circled the cinder block's walls and popped from the gunnery slots. "I'm going to be white. I'm white. Me too. Too many in here. We need more blacks." "Not me. Not me. We ain't got enough guns. Only the ones with guns are in. The rest of you get out. You're black." "Give me a gun. I had it first." "Come on, you meatballs. Black's the best part. You get to charge." "Yeah, we get to lose." "Look, you can use beer cans for grenades. You can lob grenades." "Then you do it." "Well, somebody's got to be black, else we ain't playing." "I'm counting. Time I hit 10, I want to see 5 of you out of here. 1. Russell counted. No one came out. Not at 9, not at 10, not after 10. Maniac and Mars stared in silence at the gunnery slots, where wide open eyes began to appear, one pair atop another. The 3 words that Mars Bars sneered, the joke that he spat out, "Yeah, bomb shelter," did not even have the moment to themselves, for just then another word, "Geronimo," came plunging from the sky and landed with a floor-jarring, heart-stopping crash directly behind him. A cobra had jumped from the hole, a fat, red-haired cobra who was now rolling on the floor and laughing so hard, as were all the cobras, that his face matched the color of his hair. "You see him? You see him jump? I never! You see his face? Somebody check out his pants. Check out his drawers. Oh, man! Oh!" Maniac had to wrap Mars Bar in a bear hug to keep him from charging the fat red roller. The laughter stopped, as if cut by scissors. The cobras were standing. John Mcnabb sauntered forward. "You got a problem, Sonny?" "That wasn't funny, John," said Maniac. "He could have been hurt." Mcnabb kept his eyes on Mars Bars. "I ain't talking to you, Magee. I'm talking to Sonny here. Don't you like our parties, Sonny boy?" Mars Bars strained against Maniac's arms. "You ain't got to worry about me coming to no more of your parties, Fishbelly. You ain't got to worry about me invading this piss-hole. Anybody come to a block away, they faint from the smell." Mcnabb advanced. Maniac shouted, "John, you owe me one. I brought the boys back." Mcnabb took another step, then stayed. The cobra stayed, and Maniac, clamping the struggling Marsbar for dear life, lugged him down a gauntlet of seething eyes to the door and the street. Marsbars wrenched free and stomped on ahead. Maniac followed. It was almost dark. High above, the street lights were buzzing on, one by one. After several blocks, Marsbars wheeled. "You suckered me. You softened me up with them pick people, then bring me here? What do you think? I was going to cry? Okay, I come over. I did it. It's done. And you don't be coming around no more. You hear me, fish? 'Cause you ain't only seen me half bad yet." He turned and headed due east. Maniac walked the other way. It was a good question. What had he thought? What had he expected? A miracle? Well, come to think of it, maybe one had happened. While he was looking for one miracle, maybe another had snuck up on him. It happened as he was clamping and lugging Marsbars down the gauntlet of cobras, trying to keep him alive. And what was Marsbars doing? Fighting him. Maniac, straining to get loose and bust some cobras. Outnumbered, outweighed, but not outhearted. That's when Maniac felt it. Pride. For this East End warrior whom Maniac could feel trembling in his arms, scared as any normal kid would be, but not showing it to them. Yeah, you're bad all right, Marsbars. You're more than bad. You're good. Maniac stopped. He'd been walking in circles. It was dark. He turned one way, then another, for the briefest moment thinking to go home, thinking it's time to go home now, then remembering that once again he had no home to go to. Chapter 43. He slept in the park that night, and for the next dozen or so, sometimes in the buffalo shed, other times the bandshell benches or the pavilion. The nights were warm now. June was on the way. He ate when and where he could. For apples and carrots and day-old hamburger buns, you couldn't beat the deer and buffalo pens. A new Acme had opened, and the bakery section always had a tray of free samples sitting on the counter. And then there were always the Pickwells. It may have been an illusion, but it seemed that the hungrier he got, the farther Mrs. Pickwell's whistle traveled. Some dinner times there was hardly a spot in town from which he could not hear it. He read in the library. He joined pickup games in the park. Baseball, basketball. School was letting out. There were more kids. Mornings were the best. He would rise with the sun's colors before the sun itself, before the bison had set out. He came to think of these apple-skin hours as his special time with the town. There was not a street or alleyway or house or store, not even a garage that he did not recognize. His footsteps felt everywhere, but on the bridge over the Schuylkill. His eyes everywhere, but on the P&W trolley trestle. And the people. Most of them did not know by name or face, yet they revealed themselves to him even as they slept. He knew them by their windows and cars and porches and toys they left outside, but most of all, he knew them by their backyards. Flowers, weeds, junk, pet houses, tree houses, vegetable gardens, rubber tires, grass ranging from desert sparse to shaggy to trim as a Marine's haircut. The backyards were different, as individual as faces. East End and West End, black and white, would begin only when the alarm clocks rang. For now, before sunrise, there were no divisions, no barriers. There were only the people, the families, the town, his town, as much as his town as anyone's. He knew he could be sleeping right then in the Beals' house, or the Pickwells', or even the Mcnabbs. But beyond that, for a few enchanted moments each newborn morning, he believed there was not a single home in Two Mills, not a single one, that would not happily welcome him to enter, and to go upstairs and curl between its sleepers. Maybe that's why he left his bandshell bench late one night in mid-June, and he went to someone's backyard in Hamilton Street, someone whose leaf lettuce he had watched growing, and quietly opened the gate and closed it behind him, and laid himself down on a white wicker love seat on the back porch. From then on, he slept in a different backyard or back porch every night. Once, finding the back door unlocked, he slept in a kitchen. Chapter 44. One morning in early July, cruising down the Apple-skin Hour, Maniac thought he heard footsteps other than his own. He stopped. Only the vast quietness responded. It happened a few more times. Must be his own footfalls echoing down the row house canyons. 2 days later, passing an alley, he thought something moved at the other end. And once, turning onto a broad street, he had the feeling, more sense than sight, that something had just flashed around a corner 2 blocks away. When these odd sensations continued for another morning or two, Maniac knew he was not alone. So he was not totally surprised when a few mornings later he turned a corner and ran smack into another early-hour cruiser. No, it wasn't the what that surprised him. It was the who, Mars Thompson. They quickly bounced off each other and went their separate ways. Neither paused, neither said a word. This was the first in a series of apparently random mergings, intersections, alleyways. One never knew when he would come upon the other. Sometimes they found themselves running the same route, only a block apart. On one occasion they trotted down the same street at the same time in the same direction, but on opposite sides of the street. And then one day, as it happened, they each turned a particular corner at the same moment and headed off in the same direction, side by side. Still neither spoke, not even their eyes met. They jogged silently for a block, then veered apart. The next time they dovetailed, they stayed that way for 2 blocks, then 3 blocks, and so on. No words, no looks, just the rhythmic slapping of their sneaker soles upon the sidewalk and the pulsing duet of their breathings. Stride for stride, shoulder to shoulder, breath for breath, till they were matching on all points. A harnessed pair, 2 runners become one. Morning after morning it happened this way, the 2 of them dovetailing at an intersection, and without the slightest hitch in stride cruising off together. Though each face showed no awareness of the other, they were in fact minutely sensitive to each other. If Mars cranked up the pace just a notch, Maniac would pick it up within a stride. If Maniac inched ahead, Mars was there. If one veered to the left or right, the other followed like a shadow. One day, one was the leader, the next day, the other. One day Mars would lead Maniac down the river, down the tracks, past the railroad gondolas, each with its mountain of coal, to its rolling mill at the steel plant where his father worked. Another day, Maniac would head for the townships to the north and west, the farmlands of the country, where dew sparkled on spiderwebs and nature was doing such fresh and wonderful things that you could almost hear the long, neat congregations of corn clapping, Amen, Amen. When the working people began leaving their houses, the daybreak boys diverged, Mars to the east end, Maniac to wherever. A week passed, a second week, morning after morning, stride for stride, breath by breath, never a word, never a glance, each believing the other simply happened to be going where he was going. They were cruising Main Street one morning, passing the Grand Movie Theater, when Piper Mcnabb came screaming down the middle of the empty street. He was wild-eyed and crying and soaking wet. His feet were slathered in coal-black mud. He shrieked and babbled at them, but he made no sense, so they just followed as he raced frantically back up the street. As they ran, the belch-like toot of a whistle grew louder and louder. He led them to the corner of Main and Swede, to where the platform of the P&W trolley terminal hung high above the sidewalk. He burst into the terminal building and up the steps. In a moment, Maniac and Mars were on the platform, gasping and following Piper's pointing finger down the tracks. What they saw pulled the fragments of Piper's babble together. The boys had been playing bombs away. Piper's part was to sail the raft down the river. Russell's part was to wait on the trolley trestle that spanned the river, and when Piper pressed underneath, bomb away from a bucketful of rocks. Everything went as planned, unless you count Russell's failing to sink the raft and Piper's practically drowning trying to beach it, until Piper returned to the terminal to find Russell still out on the trestle. Apparently, without the target below to focus on, Russell had suddenly discovered how high he was. One false step and he could slip right between the ties to the river. And that's where Russell was now, out on the middle of the trestle, high above the water, frozen in terror, not even a railing to cling to, responding neither to Piper's cries nor to the red and yellow P&W trolley, which also occupied the trestle, idling and tooting about 20 feet away. Piper pulled at Maniac. "Save him! Save him!" Mars stared with growing astonishment at Maniac, whose wide, unblinking eyes were fixed on the trestle, yet somehow did not seem to register what was there. Nor did he seem to hear Piper pleading. With the drenched Mudfoot kid clawing at him, he turned without a word, without a gesture, and left the platform and went downstairs. Shortly he appeared on the sidewalk below. He crossed Main and continued walking slowly up Swede, Piper screaming after him from the end of the platform. Chapter 45. "Magee! Magee!" Maniac's first groggled thought was that it was the buffalo calling to him. Then he thought, "It's the superintendent. He's discovered me and he's come to kick me out." He propelled himself up on his elbow, swatted a straw from his ear, and gave a better listen. "Magee! Magee!" It was Mars. It was the second night following the morning at the trestle. Maniac had been asleep in the buffalo lean-to. He stood. "Magee! Where are you?" "Here, over here." He headed toward the voice over the hoof-chopped earth. The moon was full. He could see Mars dark form against the fence, Then he could see his eyes. "What are you doing here? I've been looking for you. I heard you hung out here." "Where'd you hear that?" "Amanda Beale, you really sleep here, man?" "What do you want?" "Where's the buffaloes? I can't see 'em." "They're sleeping, like every other person that's got sense. What are you doing out here at this time of night?" "I snuck out. I'm not there when they wake up. They'll figure 'em out running, like usual." "Ain't you afraid in there?" "No." Both fell silent. Cricket talk and fireflies held the night. "Magee?" "Yeah? I gotta ask you something." "Go ahead." Why didn't you go after the kid? Why'd you go away?" Maniac didn't answer. "Listen, man, I know you wasn't scared. I know it. So I had to come ask you." Maniac's voice came faintly. "Is he okay?" "I asked you first." Maniac drew a long breath. "You want to come in?" Marspars laughed. "You kiddin'? Ain't no buffalo gonna eat this dude. They don't eat people. You come out here, man." Maniac climbed the fence. He started to walk. Marspars walked with him. Maniac told him the story of his parents' death. He told about his problem with the trestle, how he had learned to avoid it. And then all of a sudden, there I was, on the platform, looking out at it, closer to it than I ever was before, up on the same level. I always saw it from below before. Now I was up there, too, where they were, looking down, and it was more real than ever. The nightmare was worse than ever. I saw the trolley coming, I saw it falling, and them. They walked in silence past the silo-shaped cage of the broken-winged golden eagle. Marspars swallowed hard. His voice was hoarse. "I knew you wasn't scared." Maniac sniffed. "I don't remember much. Next thing I knew, I was somewhere on Sweet Street." "Somebody come down the East End like you did, all by himself? A fish belly? Get all up in my face?" He rippled a stick along the deer pen fence. "I knew scared, wasn't it?" "So?" said Maniac. "What happened?" Marspars laughed, wagged his head. "Happened? Man, I still don't believe it." He rippled the fence. "That little honky, he looks at me with his crybaby face and says, 'Okay, can I go out and get his brother?' I look around like, 'Is somebody else here?' I says to him, 'Who you talking to? Me?' I'm just pulling his chain, only he don't know it. 'Cause I'm ticked a little, you know, 'cause there he was hollering for you up the street, and there I was standing right alongside the stupid white potato. Understand what I'm saying?" Maniac nodded, and out of the darkness came the strangest sound, a kind of amplified gulp. Marspars jumped. "What's that?" "Emu," said Maniac. "There." Behind the nearest fence loomed a tall, thin neck, by a small head. What?" "Emu. Second largest bird in the world, after the ostrich. They're from Australia." "I don't remember studying about no emu. You buddies with all these dudes?" "No, just a buffalo. So go ahead. What happened?" "What happened?" Marspars snorted. "What happened was, I went out and rescued the dumb fish, like to get myself killed." Maniac touched Marspars' arm. "He's okay?" Marspars snickered. "Yeah, he's okay. But that ain't the main part. The main part is how he was all grabbing onto me, coming off them tracks, shaking, shivering, hugging, like he wanted to climb inside me. I was afraid." He shook his head, giggled. "Afraid the fish belly was going to kiss me." They laughed. Maniac tried to picture it, the two of them, making their way across the trestle, tie by tie, arms wrapped around each other. "And even that ain't the mainest part," said Marspars, his voice rising in wonder. "Even when we got off, the midget wouldn't let go. 'We're off it,' I says to him. 'You're rescued.' But all he does is grab me harder, like he's an octopus or something." Off the platform, down the steps, out to the street. He's still doing it. I couldn't pry him off, nohow. "So," said Maniac, "what did you do?" "What did I do? I took him home." Maniac stopped dead. "What?" Marspars shrugged. "I figured let my mom pry him off me. Of course, the other one had to come too, but I made him leave them muddy sneakers outside." He put his nose to the fence. "What's in there? I don't see nothing." "Prairie dog town. They're underground." "So what then?" "So my mother took over. She pried the one off me, and soon as she does, he jumps right onto her like an octopus. I go to pull him off, and she gets all mad at me and says, 'Let him go! Let him go!' She gets the wet one dried off, takes his clothes, and puts my old stuff on him. Stuff she's been saving in case I get a little brother someday. But I won't, 'cause my mom can't have no babies no more. And I ain't even come to the craziest part yet." "What's that?" "They didn't want to go home. They stayed all day. My mother babying 'em, feeding 'em. I tell her not to. She swats me away. Sometimes my mom ain't got no sense. She makes me play games with 'em, Monopoly and stuff. Finally, my father drives them home. It's after dark. They're getting out of the car, and know what they say to me? I'm in the car, too. He wagged his head. "They asked me to come in and play that game of theirs. Rebels! Like they beg me. They say, 'Come on, please. If you play with us, we'll let you be white.' You believe that?" Maniac chuckled. "I believe it." They walked on. "Magee?" "Yeah. I had to ask you something. Now I gotta tell you something." "What's that?" "You smell like a buffalo." Ears of 100 different shapes prickled at the long, loud laughter of the boys. "Magee?" Marspar said after a spell. "Yeah? My mother wants to ask you something, too." "Your mother?" "Yeah, like I told her about you. You know, actually, she already heard about you." "So?" "So she wants to know, why you don't come to our house." Maniac turned, stared directly at Marspar. Marspar looked away. He said nothing more. They walked on, silent among the crickets and the fireflies. Having made a full circle of the zoo, they were back at the pen of the American bison. Maniac said, "I can't." "Why not?" said Marspar. "My house not good enough? My mother?" Maniac struggled for the words. "I didn't say I didn't want to. It's just, I don't know, things happen. I can't." "Look, man," Marspar snapped, "ain't nobody saying come live with us. All she's saying is you want to come for a little, visit. You want to? Well, come on, you can, that's all. Don't go making no big thing, man. Ain't no big thing." Maniac shuddered. He turned his eyes to the sky, beyond the flickering fireflies to the stars. There were no answers. They were as far away as the constellations. "I gotta go," he said. And before Marspar could react, he was over the fence and hurrying to the lean-to. Chapter 46. The teeth of the buffalo clamped firmly upon his ear and lifted his head up from the straw, up from sleep. Marspar was right. They do eat people. The buffalo did more than bring great pain to his ear. It spoke to him. "Ain't you nice? Ain't you nice?" But the voice of the buffalo was the voice of Amanda Beale, and its teeth were her fingers pulling and wrenching his poor ear till he was sitting upright. "See that?" she snapped and scrambled his brains with a smack to the head. He'd rather she pulled his ear. "There you go, making me say ain't. I have not said that word all year long, and now you go making me so mad." She snatched a handful of straw and flung it at him. "I'm sorry," he said. He wondered if he would have had better luck in an emu pen. "Can I ask a question?" "Make it quick," she growled. "Except for making you say ain't, what is it I'm saying I'm sorry for?" "What?" she screeched. She was standing above him, hands on her hips. He didn't need the light of day to feel the look on her face. "You're sorry for a whole mess of things, boy. You're sorry because you didn't accept Snicker's invitation to his house. And you're sorry because he came throwing a ball up against my bedroom window and waking me up and telling me I had to get up out of my bed and sneak out of my house in the middle of the night and come out here and do something about all of this. That is why you are sorry, boy." Maniac yawned. "Snickers? That's what I'm changing his name to. How bad can you act if everybody's calling you," she said it loud, "Snickers?" A voice came rasping from the fence. "Shut up, girl." Maniac howled with laughter. It struck him that it had been a long time since he'd reared back like this, so he just let the laughter carry on as long as it wanted. When he finally settled down, Amanda said, "Okay, let's go." "Huh?" said Maniac. "Let's go." "Where?" "Home." "Whose?" "Mine, yours, ours. Come on, I'm sleepy." Oh, no. Maniac opened his mouth to speak, to protest, to explain. But there was too much. 100 nights would not be long enough to explain, to make her understand. So he simply said, "I can't," and lay back down. In an instant he was bolt upright again, yanked by a hand he couldn't believe belonged to a girl. "Don't tell me can't. I didn't come all the way out here in my nightshirt and my slippers and climb that fence and almost kill myself so I could hear you tell me can't." She was yelling. Several pens away, Prairie Dog Town stirred. Heads popped into the moonlight. "You got it all wrong, Buster. You ain't gotta—" "Ooh, see," she kicked him. "You do not have a choice. I am not asking you, I am telling you. You are coming home with me, and you're going to sleep in my room, which is going to be your room. And I don't care if you sleep on the floor or the windowsill or what, but you're going to sleep there and not here. And you're going to sleep there tonight and tomorrow night and the night after that and the night after that and every night, except maybe once in a while if you decide to sleep over at Snicker's house, if he ever asks you again. This is not your home. Now move!" She jerked him to his feet. Applause and a brief whistle came from the fence. Amanda led him by the hand across the muddy, lumpy earth. "Boost me," she commanded at the fence. He boosted her. Marspar helped her down from the other side. Maniac hesitated, then climbed over himself. They walked through the zoo and down the boulevard, the three of them, Amanda, Mars Bar Snickers, and Maniac, Amanda grumbling all the way. "You're more trouble outside the house than in it. Now I'm going to have to throw these slippers away. There's probably buffalo poop all over them, and you better not come within 10 feet of me, boy, till you get a bath." Maniac said nothing. He was quite content to let Amanda do the talking, for he knew that behind her grumbling was all that he had ever wanted. He knew that finally, truly, at long last, someone was calling him home.